Great, stupid o'clock Sunday morning to you all, folks. My name is Tiffany Daniels, and this is another episode of Spilling Tea. So, a few things before we get started this morning. Just real quick here. First of all, as always, folks, you can find the link for these articles in the description, as well as the video that kicked off all of these multiple videos about the JRC and why we are actually doing these videos in the first place. Also, you will find the link to the petition to shut down the Judge Rotenberg Center. If you haven't already signed the petition, please go ahead and do so as soon as possible. Also, folks, when we are talking about the JRC, especially in regards to this article, it does include vivid descriptions of people with disabilities being abused and tortured. So if you have young ones present, please don't forget to wear your headphones. Also, folks, it is 5:13 a.m. in the morning. I guess I said it is stupid o'clock. So, if I happen to horribly mangle any of the words or trip over my sentences, as I'm prone to do from time to time, I do apologize in advance. Okay, without further ado, let's go where we left off yesterday in the document called Inhumane Beyond All Reason, Shane Nurmeyer. All right. So let's go ahead and go back to where we were from yesterday. Over the next few years, the use of adversives at JRC attracted federal and international attention. In America, both the Food and Drug Administration and the Department of Justice opened investigations into the JRC practices, as they should. Meanwhile, the United Nations declared that its use of electric shock and long-term restraint on children and adults with disabilities violated the international human rights protections against torture. Still, the Massachusetts legislature failed to pass any state laws banning or regulating the shocks, and the JRC continued to enjoy the support of its students' families, with Brandon Sanchez's father saying that he would rather put a bullet in his son's brain than have him go off the GED, claiming that it would be more humane. Wow. You would rather kill him than let him not be tortured. Well, you must be Uncle of the Year. God, these people. Ugh. Because we're just animals to you, right? For its part, JRC responded to this growing condemnation by using the arguments it had relied on since it had first opened. Despite the fact that the field of behavioral psychology had made significant advances in the area of positive, non-aversive methods of treatment since then, its administration and lawyers continued to tell lawmakers and the public at large that the choice for the students with severe behavioral problems, or rather their parents, was between adversives used at JRC and copious amounts of harmful psychotropic medications, which it's not. These are not the only two choices, but my God, these people just drink the Kool-Aid. Furthermore, even as JRC began to run audio ads calling for parents to send their children with truancy and academic problems, and even as they recruited students from impoverished backgrounds with minor, if any, disabilities, they insisted that it was a school of last resort. See, they even go after students who would have been like me in school, who caused very little disruption of any kind, followed rules almost to the point of blindness. And yet they would have still probably, had I lived in Massachusetts, gone after my dad and stepmom. A futile attempt, I might add, but they would have tried. Treating the most severely aggressive and self-injurious people with disabilities in the country only after all other programs had failed them. So they're lying there. If you have people who don't need a whole lot of supports and you're throwing them and just saying, well, they need to come to us. They need to have the disability tortured out of them. Yeah, go to hell. Okay. In response to the allegations that the JRC used shock and other punishments for minor and even harmless behaviors, they not only confirmed that this was the case, but defended it as necessary as shocks for more dangerous behaviors. Like, this is disgusting. For instance, in his replies to some of the investigation reports, Matthew Israel justified the use of aversives in response to target behavior of closing one's eyes by saying that a person who closed their eyes too frequently ran the risk of falling downstairs or otherwise coming to harm. What the fuck? What the actual... For closing their eyes, folks. Closing their eyes. Stuff that you may do whenever you're overtired. Oh my god. And defended shocking a student for nagging by writing that his behavior was so compulsive and frequent that it once led to caregivers at a previous placement trying to strangle him and lock him in a room. So because another place tortured him, it's okay for us to do so. Fuck me, what is this logic? Not for children, folks. Nonetheless, or instead, perhaps unsurprisingly, opposition to JRC and its practices continued to increase. In 2011, the Massachusetts Office of the Attorney General prosecuted Matthew Israel for his role in hampering the investigation into the unprovoked use of shock on two students 4 years earlier. Israel, despite insisting on his having done nothing wrong, pled guilty to charges of misleading a witness and destroying evidence. As a result of this, he was forced to resign from his position as executive director and, in fact, leave the JRC. The same year, the state of Massachusetts passed regulations banning the most painful and restrictive aversives, including those used at the JRC. However, it attempted to avoid further controversy by carving out an exception for the use of aversives on students whose treatment plans already included them, effectively doing nothing to protect them against continuing abuse. Thank you. The man belongs behind bars. They all do. Every last one of them. Oh my god. Finally, in 2012, the public saw what JRC does to people like disabilities through proof that was irrefutable and impossible to ignore. This came to light in the form of a video shown to a jury and news cameras as part of a lawsuit against the JRC after being suppressed by the request of the JRC's attorneys for 8 years, of a young autistic adult named Andre McCollins being restrained and shocked 31 times over the course of 7 hours at the program. The footage begins with Andre sitting calmly in his chair while JRC staff asks him to take off his coat. He doesn't move to take it off, and suddenly he's screaming in pain from a shock, and he gets off the chair to hide under his desk. The staff members in the room drag him out, and 5 of them are holding him down, meanwhile shocking him for tensing up and screaming in fear and pain. Later in the tape, he's shown strapped face down to a 4-point restraint board, yelling out, "No, no, no, help, help me, help, 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 help," before screaming in pain, and a buzzing sound in the background makes it clear that he's been shocked again. The outcry this time not just by disability rights advocates, but by the public at large in Massachusetts and around the world was enormous. Nearly 250,000 people petitioned the Massachusetts state legislature to ban the shocks after seeing what happened to Andre McCollins, and indeed, JRC opponents in the Massachusetts Senate renewed their attempts to pass a total ban on all painful and restrictive aversives. On the same day that 100 people gathered in protest in front of the Massachusetts State House and the JRC itself, the United Nations condemned JRC for its torture of people with disabilities a second time and demanded that the U.S. government investigate and take action to stop it. Still, as of writing this, JRC is still open and continues to shock, restrain, starve, and otherwise abuse approximately 100 of its students. many, if not most of them, autistic or otherwise disabled, in the name of treatment and under the protection of the law. Despite all the information that exists to show why the JRC should be closed and its methods banned, many people, including politicians, journalists, and treatment professionals, refuse to take an outright stance against them, even where that stance could very well make enough of an impact to accomplish either or both of these things. They insist that there must be two, and thus two equally valid sides to every story, and continue to give the JRC and its supporters a forum to make the same arguments, untrue as they always were, that they've made for 40 years. They assume that doctors, parents, and other caretakers who deal with people with disabilities know best, and thus they do too, or agree on behalf of people with disabilities must be necessary. They take it for granted that people with disabilities' dangerous behaviors are incomprehensible and thus must be managed rather than understood. Thank you! I've been saying this. And are then willing to have that principle extended to everything else a supposedly dangerous person with a disability does. Even now, they call what the JRC does treatment. That's why it still happens. And there's all the references. But yes, that's how they get away with it, folks. This is how they get away with torturing us and brutalizing us. Because we deserve it because we're disabled. And as long as it's called treatment, it's okay. It's not okay for us to use on war criminals and interrogation, but it's okay to use against us because they call it treatment. They call it conditioning. They call it behavioral modification. And if you are one of us and you see stuff like this, you learn to fear those words. All right, folks, that's all I have for you for this morning. At least on this. There may be another video out here in a few minutes once I get this posted up. But as always, folks, we don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So, folks, please don't forget to hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time. And as always, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.